What if I told you that the man who stood stoically beside his wife's coffin, accepting condolences with trembling hands, was seen checking into a hotel with her grieving sister just 2 days later? What if that perfect marriage everyone envied was actually a carefully constructed lie that ended in murder? Stay with me until the end of this story, because the truth behind Eliza Whitmore's death will shock you in ways you never imagined. Mark and Eliza Whitmore seemed to have it all. Their white colonial house sat perfectly on a manicured cul-de-sac in Arlington, Virginia. Rose bushes bloomed in their front yard, even when the weather disagreed. Neighbors described them as storybook perfect. Mark was a respected civil engineer who left for work every morning in crisp shirts and polished shoes. Eliza ran a boutique downtown specializing in handmade accessories, where customers stopped by just to chat. Their marriage appeared untouchable. They hosted summer barbecues, sent beautiful holiday cards, and always seemed to know exactly what to say to each other. Mark brought Eliza flowers just because. Eliza kept Mark's coffee ready every morning, 2 sugars, no cream. To the outside world, they were flawless. Brianna, Eliza's younger sister, was a regular fixture in their lives. In her mid-20s, she had recently finished graduate school and was staying with the Whitmores while searching for work and her own place. The sisters were incredibly close. They shared everything, secrets, clothes, sometimes even finishing each other's sentences. Brianna had always looked up to her older sister, and Eliza enjoyed doting on her in return. Nothing seemed strange about Brianna living in the house. Nothing unusual about Mark occasionally helping her with job applications or giving advice about budgeting. Everything appeared above board. But as weeks passed, a subtle shift began to occur. Only the most observant would have caught it. A lingering glance here, an awkward silence there. Moments between Mark and Brianna that didn't belong. No one noticed. Or if they did, they chose not to say anything. October 22nd was a Sunday. Cool, gray, and still. The kind of morning that felt like it was holding its breath. The housekeeper arrived at 9 in the morning, like she always did. Only this time, she found something she could never unsee. Eliza was in the bathtub. The water had gone cold. Her eyes were open but lifeless, her skin pale. There were no signs of struggle, no blood, no disarray. Just silence and the soft hum of a house that no longer felt like home. The initial assumption was simple. An accident. Maybe she slipped while trying to get out. Maybe she fainted. The coroner's early findings supported this theory. No trauma, no indication of force. The police ruled it an accidental drowning. Within 48 hours, the file was closed. Her death certificate was issued. The funeral was scheduled. Mark was the picture of a grieving husband. He didn't speak much, but when he did, his voice cracked under the weight of emotion. At the service, he clutched Eliza's photograph with trembling hands. Friends and family offered condolences, expressing disbelief at how something so tragic could happen so suddenly. Brianna sat beside Mark in the front pew, weeping quietly, her face buried in tissue. Even amidst the solemn ceremony, some couldn't help but notice the closeness between them. Not overt, but present. The way their shoulders brushed as they stood. The way Mark reached for her hand when they walked away from the gravesite. It could have been interpreted as shared grief. 2 people mourning the same loss, bound by love for the same woman. And yet, 2 days later, Mark would check into a roadside hotel under a false name. And he wouldn't be alone. Before we continue with this shocking story, if you're enjoying this deep dive into true crime, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You won't want to miss our upcoming investigations into cases that will leave you questioning everything you think you know. It started with a hunch at the Delacroix Inn. Angela Marsh had worked the front desk for nearly 10 years. Nothing much happened there. Business travelers, passing couples, and the occasional family on a budget road trip. But on the evening of October 26th, something about the man who checked in under the name David Wells nagged at her. He was polite, well-groomed, and clearly not new to discretion. He avoided eye contact, paid in cash, and requested a room at the far end of the hallway. Moments later, a woman joined him. Young, striking, and familiar. Not from the hotel, but from somewhere else. Angela couldn't place her right away, but her instinct flickered. Something didn't feel right. 3 days later, Angela was flipping through the local paper during a slow shift. Page 7 held a small article about a local woman who drowned in her bathtub, ruled accidental. It featured a photo of Eliza Whitmore smiling beside her husband. Angela blinked. Her heart stuttered. She recognized the man immediately. It was David Wells. And the woman he'd arrived with that night wasn't the one in the photograph, but she looked eerily similar. Angela didn't sleep that night. She rewatched the security footage with sharp focus. There he was, Mark Whitmore, wearing a baseball cap low on his forehead. But it wasn't enough to hide his identity. Then the woman appeared. No cap, no effort to hide. Her long hair fell over one shoulder, and when she turned her face toward the camera, Angela paused the footage. It was Eliza's sister, Brianna. Angela made a quiet phone call to a local investigative journalist. She sent the surveillance tape, the booking information, and the newspaper clipping. The journalist called back within an hour. Her voice was calm, but urgent. She'd look into it. Carla traced the life insurance policy first. A quick search revealed that Mark had filed a $500,000 claim just days after Eliza's death. The policy had been taken out less than a month earlier. That alone wasn't evidence, but it was enough to set off alarms. She then checked Brianna's public social media profiles. They had all been deactivated within 24 hours of the funeral. Clean wipe. No updates, no posts. Just gone. The hotel footage began circulating quietly between journalists and eventually landed in the hands of local police. The case, once labeled an unfortunate household accident, was reopened quietly. No press releases, no public statements, just silent suspicion and new questions. Why was Mark using an alias? Why was he at a hotel with Brianna days after burying his wife? And most disturbingly, was Eliza's death really an accident, or had it been carefully staged to look like one? When the case was reopened, it didn't begin with sirens or bold accusations. It began in silence. Private meetings, quiet phone calls, and discreet reviews of old evidence. The autopsy report was pulled from the archives. At first glance, it still appeared routine. Accidental drowning, no significant trauma, minor bruising consistent with a fall. But when a second independent pathologist took a closer look, things started to shift. The bruises around Eliza's neck weren't as superficial as first thought. They were faint, yes, but too uniform for a simple fall. More disturbingly, a detailed toxicology screen detected a trace amount of a powerful sedative. Not enough to kill her outright, but more than enough to render her unconscious in a bathtub. It had been missed the first time, or perhaps overlooked. Now it changed everything. Detectives returned to the Whitmore home under the guise of following up. A laptop recovered from Mark's home office was analyzed. Hidden in a folder buried 3 directories deep were search queries that painted a haunting picture. How to make a death look accidental. Sedatives that don't show up in autopsies. Life insurance payout after spouse dies. The searches spanned weeks, starting shortly before the policy was purchased. When police interviewed Brianna, she seemed fragile. Her eyes were puffy and red. Her hands trembled. They didn't need to press hard. Her guilt spilled out in fragments. She admitted that she and Mark had been having an affair. It had begun innocently, she claimed. Just late-night conversations when Eliza was asleep. Then secret text messages. Then meetings outside the house. It escalated quickly. Mark told her he was unhappy, that Eliza had changed, that he felt trapped in a loveless marriage. Brianna said she was drawn in by his vulnerability, convinced that they were both victims. But she insisted she had nothing to do with Eliza's death. According to her, she believed Mark's grief was real. He had broken down in her arms after the funeral, saying he couldn't bear to be alone. Investigators found Brianna's story convenient but incomplete. She had deleted every message between her and Mark, claiming she wanted to move on. But forensic experts retrieved fragments from backups. The texts were suggestive and emotional. Mark had written things like, "Soon it'll just be us," and "Trust me, everything will fall into place." There were no direct confessions, but the tone was foreboding. It wasn't love. It was a plan. A neighbor's home security camera offered one final blow. Though Mark told police he had been out of town the night before Eliza's death, the footage showed him arriving home in the middle of the night, staying for several hours, and then leaving before dawn. He had lied. Not once, not by accident. He had crafted an alibi, assuming no one would check. By now, detectives were no longer asking if Eliza was murdered. They were asking how, why, and who would crack first. Behind the polished exterior of Mark Whitmore's life was a carefully constructed lie, one built not in a moment of madness, but brick by brick over time. Detectives retraced his movements on the day Eliza died. The timeline he had given was tight. He claimed to have been on site at a construction project in Charlottesville all day, 100 miles from home. But records didn't back that up. The company vehicle tracker showed long gaps in his whereabouts. Cell tower data told a different story. At 2:13 in the morning, Mark's phone had pinged a tower just 5 miles from his home. At 2:31, he turned off the device entirely. It remained dark until 7:45 when it suddenly came back online miles away, back on the highway. Forensics went back into the Whitmore residence, this time with a court order to swab the bathroom for traces of the sedative found in Eliza's system. Beneath the edge of the vanity, embedded in a towel that had fallen between the cabinet and the wall, was a faint sticky residue. The lab results confirmed it contained the same compound found in her toxicology report. It had been administered at home, likely mixed into a drink or applied directly to her skin through a transdermal gel. Eliza had no prescription for such a substance, but a local pharmacy's records showed that a similar compound had been filled under a business account belonging to one of Mark's former construction clients. The signature was digital, difficult to trace, but not impossible. A technician compared the digital handwriting to Mark's known signature. The match wasn't just close. It was exact. And yet, as the net tightened around him, Mark was nowhere to be found. When detectives returned to question him further, they discovered the Whitmore house was empty. His car was gone. His phone was turned off. Brianna claimed not to have heard from him since the hotel incident had surfaced publicly. Her voice cracked when she said his name. Whether out of heartbreak or fear, no one could tell. The search for Mark began quietly, then expanded quickly. His bank accounts had been drained over several weeks through small, undetectable withdrawals. A passport was missing from a locked drawer in his home office. Cameras from a Greyhound station in Richmond caught someone matching his description boarding a bus 2 days before the warrant for his arrest was issued. But the trail ended there. Meanwhile, his name dominated headlines. Reporters latched onto the story of the man who had buried his wife and checked into a hotel with her sister 2 days later. Eliza's death was no longer seen as a tragic accident. It had become a puzzle, one that the public was desperate to solve. Family and friends were horrified. Those who had stood by Mark at the funeral now spoke in hushed tones, questioning what they had missed. Eliza's parents released a short statement through their attorney. "We believe justice is coming. Our daughter deserves the truth." But for investigators, justice was slipping through their fingers. They had evidence, motive, and a growing mountain of circumstantial proof. But without Mark, the case stalled. Warrants were issued. Alerts were sent to airports and border crossings. Still, he vanished like smoke in the wind. Every day that passed without him raised more questions. Had he planned the escape all along? Was someone helping him? Or had he gone into hiding, waiting for the noise to die down? One thing was clear. The perfect husband had become the prime suspect in a crime that now felt anything but accidental. 6 weeks had passed since Mark Whitmore disappeared. Media attention, once relentless, had begun to shift to new scandals, new tragedies, new headlines. Then, out of nowhere, an anonymous tip came in. A man matching Mark's description had been spotted in a small coastal town in Maine. He was living under the name Greg Thompson, working odd jobs at a local marina, and renting a tiny cottage near the water. The tipster provided photos. Grainy but clear enough. It was him. Federal marshals moved in swiftly, surrounding the cottage before sunrise. There was no dramatic escape attempt, no resistance. Mark opened the door slowly, looked at the officers, and said only one thing. "I knew you'd come eventually." His arrest sent shock waves through the public. After weeks of silence, A face that had become almost mythic was once again front and center. But this time, he wasn't in a crisp suit beside his wife. He was in handcuffs under harsh fluorescent lights, being booked for first-degree murder. In the days that followed, new evidence came to light. Documents Mark had tried to destroy before disappearing were recovered from a hidden hard drive in his home office. It was a digital journal he had kept for nearly a year. Within its pages were carefully detailed entries. His frustrations with Eliza, his growing obsession with Brianna, his thoughts on how to end his marriage without financial ruin. One entry, dated just 3 weeks before Eliza's death, read, "If she's gone, everything changes. I'd be free. I could start over with someone who understands me." The trial was set to be one of the most watched in recent memory. Prosecutors built their case with precision, presenting the digital evidence, the toxicology findings, the hotel footage, and the suspicious life insurance policy. They painted Mark as a man who saw murder not as a desperate act, but as a solution. Cold, calculated, deliberate. The defense argued that Eliza's death was still accidental, that the sedative could have been taken unknowingly, perhaps a mix-up with medications. They said the affair with Brianna, while inappropriate, had no bearing on Eliza's death. They framed Mark as a grieving husband who made poor choices, not a killer. Brianna was called to testify. Her appearance in court was haunting. She wore black, her voice shaky, her eyes red. She recounted her relationship with Mark in painful detail, admitting to the affair but denying any knowledge of a murder plot. When asked if she believed Mark had killed her sister, she hesitated for a long moment, then said, "I didn't want to believe it, but now I don't know who he really was." After weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for 3 days. When they returned, the courtroom was silent. Guilty of first-degree murder, obstruction of justice, conspiracy to defraud. Mark showed no emotion. He simply nodded, as if he had already accepted his fate. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Outside the courtroom, Eliza's parents embraced quietly. There were no tears left to cry, just the knowledge that the truth had finally surfaced, no matter how ugly it was. In the weeks that followed, the house on the corner of the quiet cul-de-sac was sold. The rose bushes withered and were uprooted. Brianna left town, her whereabouts unknown. Though justice had been served, a lingering shadow remained. A reminder that even the most perfect lives can hide the darkest secrets. And that love, when twisted by obsession and deceit, can become something terrifying. The case of Mark and Eliza Whitmore serves as a chilling reminder that we never truly know what goes on behind closed doors. That the person sleeping next to you could be capable of the unthinkable. If this story has left you as shocked as it left me, don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into cases that reveal the dark side of human nature. Hit that notification bell, because trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next.